I'm sick. I have assignments, I can do them, but I just want to play Zelda. Before I do, get rid of temptation, or else it'll distract you. Being distracted is your worst foe if you're an artist. Man, I hate this. If you look at the recording date, aka the title of the video, it'll say that it is May 12th. Tears of the Kingdom is supposed to come out on May 12th. In America, not here in the Philippines. Tears of the Kingdom, I'm crying tears of the time zones. So, I'm playing Tears of the Kingdom at home, aka the prequel to Batu. I knew there would be more open world Zelda games, but I didn't expect it would be a direct sequel. Honestly, I'm not a fan. Well, obviously I'm still going to love the game. It's just I wanted a different timeline, not a direct sequel. But a direct sequel is what we've got, and I'm really happy with it nonetheless. Whether or not it's a direct sequel or new timeline like the rest of the sequels of Zelda, it doesn't really matter to me. I'm just used to there being new timelines, since and stuff. Anyway, so the harder bosses are fucking bullshit still. Turns out I can override the HP using the custom bosses that Mercus has. So I use that, and now the enemies do have less health, but they're still hyper aggressive and super hard to beat. But let's see. I changed the settings. I was debating whether or not I should use just default bosses or I should try the overhaul version, which is supposed to be for Hyrule rebalanced. Although Dark Army Resurrection expects you use the normal values for weapons and stuff with Hyrule rebalance, but again, custom bosses fight fixes that for me. Hyrule rebalance does make the bosses harder by default, just because their HP values are unaltered unlike every other monster in the game. Oh, it's low. Okay, there's still some fast attacks. Fuck. It still hurts. Ah! It's gonna regenerate soon. I believe the timer for the regeneration is 10 seconds for the bosses. Every monster in Master Mode has its own timer for when they'll start regenning, as well as how much they regen when they are regenerating. Ah. It dawns on me that I don't actually know the timing for Fire Blight Ganon all that well. Wind Blight doesn't have any attacks that you can parry. Fire Blight is always like the last boss or stuff that I beat, and I'm always usually already well equipped to beat him. Dark Army Resurrection forces me to actually take every boss fight, every Blight Ganon seriously. Which, I've never done that. for Fire Blight. I don't actually know how to fight this guy. Because when I fight him, he usually dies instantly. No, it's regenerating so quickly, what the hell? Okay, this is definitely more manageable though.
Imagine being happy to see this place. Swarms of vermin crawl across the floor, biting and stinging the three as they follow Darce, who practically sprints down the hall, heedless of the split-open heart bulging out of the floor or the dead guard in the hall. She follows a trail of blood to a barred door, and beyond. The guard is dead. His throat has been cut. All of this was for nothing. If only Darce had been faster. She falls to her knees, sobbing. The girl can only stare at him with an uncanny look of recognition, tears on her cheeks. Kahara scoffs. All this for nothing. He can't help but be annoyed by the dead man. What was any of this even for? Eventually, Darce pulls herself together to leave, but as she does, she encounters a strange man, who comments on Legarde's importance and how unexpected it is that he didn't make it. He gestures at a dark corridor, suggesting the three give it a look. After all, the guard came here for a reason. The guard's fate is decided simply by how quickly you can reach him. Sleeping, fighting, having a dalliance with the bunny masks, none of that matters. If the time on your file is under 30 minutes, the man is alive. If it's over, he's dead. Which is the canon outcome is a matter of debate, but due to the mutual exclusivity of certain confirmed canon events if things go otherwise, the guard's death would seem to be the likelier of the two. The dungeons are sacred to the old faith, a nexus where the barrier between worlds is thin. It is said to be one of the last places where a man may meet his creators, and according to the priests who now lie strewn about their own altar, a ritual is underway to bring about paradise. What exactly that means is uncertain, but Legarde was supposed to be the key. Enki digs around the corpse pile until he pulls his prize free. A severed head. The funny dancing men are yellow mages, cultists of this head, the great wizard Nasra, who are here to do their master's bidding. Or they were until Enki killed them. The floating head can't help but laugh at his moxie, and once Enki explains that he had a vision that enlightenment awaits him in the depths, Nasra agrees to take him on as a pupil. Well, Nasra is a fantastic party member. He's also incredibly foul-mouthed and will roast, sometimes literally, the hell out of a lot of the characters that you encounter. Hundreds of years ago, Nasra was known as the doom and terror of modern man. He's a villainous wizard in the mold of Vecna or Abdul al-Hazred, and though he and his cult venerate Groveroth, it's entirely transactional. The Yellow Mages believe in serving only insofar as it advances their aims, hating all gods and kings but themselves. As he wanders the cavern, smashing nomads, he hears the snarl of a cave wolf. The six-eyed creature has a mouthful of razor teeth, but the Outlander senses a certain nobility in her bearing. She's a creature of the dark, but unlike so many others, she's held on to her sanity. He throws her some old meat, and in short order, the two are the best of friends. He names her Moonless, and the two travel the caverns, striking down evil and marking their territory wherever they go. The Cave Mother, as it turns out, survived its encounter with Darce. Wingless, it charges Ragnvaldr in the dark, but he strikes it down with a single stroke of his eastern sword. Near the village of the Dwellers, they encounter the Salmon Snake, a gigantic axolotl that may as well be a dragon. Ragnvaldr distracts it with a few of the remaining gnome eggs, while Moonless gets into position and tears out its eye. Blinded, the creature is no match for Eastern steel. The Salmon Snake is deceptively easy, especially if you have two party members. If you have a Soul Stone, killing it will grant the Salmon Snake's soul, an accessory that prevents bleeding and limb loss. The pair eventually bump into Enki and Nasra at the home of an alchemist who has taken up residence in the caverns. While the Outlander is initially skeptical, Nasra has a plan that's simply too good to pass up. Kahara follows along after Darce as she approaches the great doors and races into. He tries to convince her to turn back, but she won't hear it. This had to mean something. The doors swing open, revealing a much older set of catacombs with unfamiliar architecture. The three evade the undead and defeat a multi-armed insect creature before finding their way through, only to discover something impossible. There's an entire city buried down here.
Shit.
Though the place is shrouded in darkness and fallen into ruin, they all recognize it. It's Mahab, the city of the gods, the place where people wander in their dreams. They make their way down the cobbled streets until they encounter a large, hairy creature dragging a half-dead knight away into the darkness. Kahara gets a sinking feeling in his stomach as he once again finds himself playing hero. The monster speaks briefly about needing to capture people for its master, but the dumb bird doesn't remember who it serves or what its purpose is beyond that. Soon, it lies dead on the cobbles. The knight is Jeanne. She's badly wounded and has lost an arm, but she's alive. Jeanne is a member of Lord Buckman's party. She was searching for Captain Rumer when she fell in battle and was captured. Nobody's seen hide nor hair of the man, and one of the party, Sir Cyril, is still missing. If he can be found, what's left of Buckman's party could at least be reunited. Unfortunately, Jeanne is gravely wounded and unable to make the trip back to her group herself. Left alone, she would not survive. Still, Darce refuses to turn back. Kahara is finally forced to admit that the woman has gone mad with grief, and he won't be able to convince her. But there's no reason to leave an innocent child with her. Supporting Jeanne with one arm, he takes the girl and leaves Darce to her lonely fate. Reunited, save for the missing Sir Cyril, Buckman's party begins to believe for the first time in days that there may still be hope for their expedition. Ragnvaldr listens as Enki discusses the riddle of the divine with his new friend Nosramus, a scholar and alchemist living deep in the mines. There's something otherworldly about the man, and he's as unsettling as he is kind. 800 years ago, a group of 5 people known as the Fellowship, Francois, Nilvan, Valtiel, Ron Shambara, and a 5th member forgotten by history sought Mahab, the city of the gods. The new world order established by the ascension of Almer had failed. The world was in chaos, and their intent was to either entreat the old gods for aid, or do what Almer had done, and become gods themselves. They fought their way to the city, chasing off the servants of the old gods and eventually claiming the throne for themselves. But, as Nazra will attest, they did not become real gods. Their ascension would provide them great longevity and fantastic powers, but they'd been duped, and they weren't even the first ones to try it. Mahab is a place where mortals seeking power have gone for centuries, only to be blinded, overwhelmed, and ultimately enslaved by it, carrying out the bidding of the old gods even as they thought they were replacing them. Once ascended, the Fellowship did succeed in bringing about a new world order, manipulating world events to shape human affairs according to their desires, but this age was fragile, and only a little better than the last. Eventually, it too would fall to chaos as the feudal age crumbled under the stress of plague and warfare. Nosramus was the 5th member of the Fellowship, and he hands Enki a trinket, something to remind himself of who and what he is, a soul anchor should he ever face the divine. Leaving Nosramus to his studies, the 2 men, the floating head, and the cave wolf make their way to the catacombs and are surprised to find the doors to Mahab open. The ruined streets are quiet, and save for a few signs of violence, they see no one. Ragnvaldr is shocked to discover that the cube of the depths has been left in the slot on his machine. He reaches out to touch it, and with a flash of green light, the 4 find themselves above ground, the city of Mahab spread out around them in all its former splendor. The late afternoon sun offers no heat as it beats down on the Golden City, and the townspeople are no more than shadows. This feels more like an illusion than the real thing, or perhaps it's a little bit of both. They head down the streets of the past, scaling a tower that eventually takes them to a chamber with a large bed. As though compelled by the hazy atmosphere, they doze off and are overwhelmed with an intense shared dream. This is the capital city of Brondon. In contrast to Mahab's gilded towers, it's a muddy, miserable place, and something about it feels warped and alien. Finding themselves in a brothel, they witness an interaction between a man named Kahara and a woman named Celeste. Celeste is a sex worker, and it turns out she's pregnant. Though Kahara has always prized his freedom above everything else, for once he feels compelled to take responsibility. There's a job, he says, and it's dangerous, but it pays enough that the two could leave their uncertain occupations and settle down to raise a family together. Celeste worries for Kahara's safety, but she knows better than to try talking him out of it. The vision fades. The two were only phantoms, a part of the dream. They next find Enki crucified, not for any crime, but rather out of ennui. It's a ritual sacrifice. The man has learned all that he can through his studies and found nothing, so he consigns himself to Alma. But at the last minute, he sees a vision. The new gods whisper in his ear. What he seeks can be found in the depths, and so he has his priests release him, and he's gone. Not far away, the very same priests claim that salvation is coming. Stepping over a few plague victims, the group leaves by the gate, and find themselves in a familiar battlefield in Oldegard. A pit grows in Ragnvaldr's stomach as he watches himself on that awful day, when he came home to discover that the Knights of the Midnight Sun had massacred the people of his village, who fought to the last to protect the cube he now carries. Within the Outlander's home, they find only inky blackness and an old woman spinning thread. After a moment, she explodes into movement, her body unfolding into some kind of articulated murder machine. They manage to dispatch the Skin Granny and are confronted with a final pair of visions. The guard, who believes that he has prophesied to bring about a new age, and Darce, who, despite her doubts, is willing to place her faith in her beloved and whatever he's planning. A half-nude woman descends toward the group, radiating brilliant white light. She is Nilvan the Endless, one of the new gods. She tells them that the time of the new gods is at an end, and that mankind was unable to break free from the old gods' influence. Something bigger and better is required. She asks that the group agree to see her child, a girl lost somewhere in the dungeon, to safety, down into the heart of darkness. She trusts her own soul to the men, hoping they can use it to accomplish what the Fellowship could not. They certainly haven't seen or heard of any child, but in an instant, Legard's plan is made clear. Legard must have intended to gather the souls of the four new gods in the hopes of combining them with his own, creating something more than they were in his ascent. To Natra, the idea seems patently moronic. It would mean climbing into the trap that the old gods had laid for ambitious men and expecting that this time, it was going to be different. Regardless, Ragnvaldr saw to it that no such thing would happen, and now, Enki and Nasra both see an opportunity before them. For the Dark Priest, the souls may offer the key to enlightenment. For Nasra, this is just desserts. Nasra, as it turns out, was a new god. The Fellowship thought they were the first, but this too is a lie. The old gods have kept new gods as pawns for a very long time now, and just as Nasra outwitted Betel and stole his title, so too was he deposed by the Fellowship. The wizard now exists as an agent of chaos, and would be glad for the chance to tear down the phony pillars of order while also exacting his revenge. They proceed to the Grand Library, a palatial storehouse of knowledge populated by strange, artificial beings created by Valtiel, the Enlightened One. They try to fashion a new body for Nasra, but Valtiel's cloning devices result only in imperfect husks. As with many other things, the true secrets of creation remain hidden to the new gods. Valtiel himself is found in the depths of the library. He plunges off a deep ledge only to arise as a gigantic head that incessantly questions the group as they fend off its magical attacks. But soon, the thing is dead, and the soul of the Enlightened is theirs. Valtiel died having failed to ever achieve anything like the power or understanding of the old gods, a stern warning to Enki and a source of smug satisfaction for Nasra. Next, they track Ron Shambara, now known as the Tormented One, to an elaborate prison. By creating a clone husk and sacrificing it, they're able to summon the Tormented One from its pool of blood.
Shit.
This is a two-stage fight. The first form is straightforward, but in the second stage, Ron will hook himself up to this gyroscope thing. He does massive damage, and you need to attack the outer wheels to make the inner body vulnerable.
God dang
The
it.
god sinks into the pool, released from centuries of unknowable torment, and the group adds his soul to their collection. Now, only one god remains. They mow through a grisly collection of monsters in search of Francois, the dominating one, and find him in the present day, overseeing his kennel. But rather than the vicious warlord they'd imagined, He's a worn-out old man, well aware that he's been cozened. He's astonished to see Nasra in the few seconds he gets before he's incinerated. But his soul is not found among the ashes. If the Fellowship is to truly be defeated, then the group must face Francois in the past, at the height of his power. There is a little room in Mahab where one can visit the Hall of the Gods. Here, we learn what becomes of them when they retire. They're relinquished to this room to sit, talk, and ponder eternity, no longer able to influence the world. They'll answer questions, and they really have a lot to say about a surprising number of subjects. This has been criticized as telling, not showing, and while that's true, there's very little information here that couldn't be inferred from the game proper. The hall mostly serves as a place to clarify things one might have missed, or to have your lore theories confirmed. The important thing is to ask them about Nasra while he's still in your party.
Ah. Coward. Fuck. Yes.
All that remains is to confront Francois at the throne. This time, it's not so easy. Francois of the past has no idea of the snare he's caught in and fights like hell to preserve his dominion. But eventually, the three triumph and he lies broken on the floor. Now carrying all four souls, Enki considers the throne. Nasra predated Valtiel,
No!
and Faintel came before that. It's unlikely that he was the first. The time-shifting devices mean that anyone who comes to this place seeking the throne, no matter when they do it, can arrive at this moment in the year 809. To the outside world, there's only been one set of new gods, but having met the alumni and visited the Great Hall, their numbers are clearly innumerable. Every so often, things get bad enough that someone comes here and does this all over again, putting themselves in a time loop and ensuring that eventually their divine tenure will be removed from the timeline when somebody else shows up to replace them. And the nature of entropy is that sooner or later, this happens no matter what. Or maybe not. Some writings suggest that the first new gods ascended centuries prior. Nasra's legacy certainly wasn't excised from history, and he maintains a cult to this day. So what exactly is going on here? For Enki, leaving would mean turning his back on the biggest leap forward he could ever take. It wouldn't do to come this far and not try it. Dark Priest ignores Nasra's warnings and sits on the throne. He finds himself alone in the void, a barren world far from his own. Its surface of barren gray stone is lit from within by a ghastly green glow. This place is what the new gods call the other side of the coin, the realm of the old gods. Here, in the presence of their power, ascension is made possible. Depending on who joins you in the green, you might learn more about it. Ragnvaldr has apparently been surviving here for a very long time, though we've just arrived. If you bring Legard, he says it's been centuries since you sat at the throne, but somehow only an eye blink for you. The void exists outside of human understanding, and probably outside of time itself. This is Elder God business, and it's likely the source of all the timeline confusion. We aren't really meant to gain a complete understanding of Fear and Hunger's divinity. Understanding would diminish the mystery. So the best you can do is pick your favorite theory. I'm fond of the single time loop, but it might actually be the case that something much more chaotic is happening.
Oh shit.
Temporal confusion here also serves to eliminate some of the narrative pressure imposed by the canon that will be established in the sequel. If we're dealing with a time machine and an unknowable dimension outside of time, there's lots of room for multiple interpretations of this game's events to play out. In any case, Enki eventually finds his divine reflection, and in a moment he experiences centuries of divinity. In 809 AD, 8 centuries before his mortal birth, he becomes a new god, the Enlightened One, whose terrific power and wisdom shepherded humanity out of antiquity, through the Dark Ages and into the Medieval Age. All the power is there, waiting to snare and shackle him in the same repetitive cycle that has come countless times before, waiting to excise him from the timeline and keep all of humanity locked in a loop, a temporal prison to match the physical one which had become so familiar to the priest. But Enki has come prepared. He feels the soul anchor that Nosramus gave him, a reminder of who and what he is, and he turns away. Enki witnesses his own divinity, but he does not take that poison prize. Instead, he returns to the world, to his own time. Not a god, but one step closer to true enlightenment, which he has learned is not a destination, but a path without end. He, Nasra, and Ragnvaldr part ways. The unlikely trio have each found fulfillment in their quests. Regard and his plans are in ruins, the new gods are dead, and Enki has been transformed by his brush with divinity. Like Nosramus, who has dwelled in the caverns for centuries, he has become something more than human. Rather than turning inward, Enki uses his wisdom for the betterment of humanity. The Dark Priest was already a respected scholar, but his treatises on the divine, known as skin Bibles, will go on to become the definitive works of religious scholarship in the coming centuries. Something has chased Kahara and the girl into the caverns, and he's beginning to think he knows what it is. The Crow Mauler is all that remains of Captain Rudimer, who stood up to the darkness and lost his mind. And though he's managed to blind it with a vial of acid, the monster is relentless in pursuing him, as if trying to drive the pair somewhere. With nowhere left to run, the pair take a leap off the edge of a precipice, tumbling into the open maw of some dead or sleeping creature. The pair step out onto a pile of bodies, impossible in number. An entire kingdom lies dead beneath their feet. At least the Mauler hasn't perceived them. But where are they? The girl walks to the edge of the abyss, and Kahara begins to feel uneasy.
What the?
The sensation grows until it's a gut-churning terror. It's coming from the girl. She falls to the ground and screams, her little body twisting into impossible shapes. Kahara tries to help, but she's thrashing out of control. She recedes briefly into the dark and rapidly stretches and grows into something new and terrible. The girl, child of Nilvan the Endless, a deity now stricken from existence, and Lagard, the dead subject of a failed prophecy, has ascended. Kahara knows none of this, but as he watches her protean body explode into different shapes, as he feels the pressure of burgeoning divinity, he realizes what he's looking at. This child, abandoned and trapped in a lifetime of terror and misery, has become the ultimate embodiment of all she's ever known. The god of fear and hunger is born. The god continues to grow and change, shifting from a representation of one little girl's misery to something more. Now she's a woman. Now she's a cavernous maw, dozens of arms reaching out as she comes to embody not just the suffering that she endured, but the suffering of others. Finally, the god settles on a faceless idol, abstract and anonymous, the kind of thing that anybody could see themselves in. It spends a moment gazing at the doll given to it by Dars, reflecting on the brief glimmer of kindness that the girl received in her last days, and then it unleashes its divine energy on Kahara, who fights with everything he has. It isn't enough. It never could be. This is not one of the new gods. It's not a thing that can be fought. It's a concept with the weight of existence behind it. To struggle against it is not difficult or even impossible. It's meaningless. But Kahara does struggle, and in struggling, he suffers. That is something the newborn god understands. she acknowledges him, and the weight of that acknowledgement crushes him instantly. Ragnvaldr goes on to become a legend, not among men, but among the monsters that prowl in the dark, who learn to fear the so-called god of ultraviolence. He travels the world with his faithful companion, hunting these creatures down for the rest of his days, until in many places, their existence is relegated to the stuff of fairy tales.
At sa saktong halaga, susulit talaga sa inipit.
Fuck you.
Crushes him instantly. Ragnvaldr goes on to become a legend, not among men, but among the monsters that prowl in the dark, who learn to fear the so-called god of ultraviolence. He travels the world with his faithful companion, hunting these creatures down for the rest of his days, until in many places, their existence is relegated to the stuff of fairy tales. In the libraries and laboratories of Mahab, sleepless and on the verge of psychosis, Darce learned a secret. She was no mage, but that's okay. Someone had already done most of the work for her. She even found Sir Cyril. He'd lost a little weight, but all he needed was a mind elixir and he was good to go. She could have left with him. There was some more important work to do. Fragmented instructions here and there contained all that she needed to prepare the spell of rebirth. And now, as she spills her blood, she's easily able to perform the incantation, as if some divine hand is guiding her. Once, that might have set off alarm bells, but Darce is no longer the woman she was. The guard's corpse sheds its skin, and a creature made of their intermingled blood rises from what was left of the man, calling itself a god. In the depths of delusion, she still believes that this is her beloved, and that one day he might feel the same. She continues to serve as his lieutenant, but he seems to have forgotten his lofty dreams of a new era, becoming little more than a bloodthirsty warlord. Akbar of Nasra. He too would venture to the heart of darkness. Though the old gods have left this world, their traces remain, and surely if he has the strength to defeat the new gods at the height of their power, he can challenge the traces of Brogroth. Ah well, nevertheless. Bahara's broken body lies on the alien plains of some unknown abyss, at the foot of the god of fear and hunger. He struggles to stand, but for some reason, he just can't. Celeste will never see Kahara again. She and her child will face the coming of a new age, unaware of the pivotal role that his sacrifice played. Fear and hunger is a being on par with the old gods. After centuries of struggling, mankind has gained a greater deity that understands and embodies the misery of human existence. She becomes the lash that drives industry, science, and commerce, and all their accompanying evils. Thus begins what will come to be known as the Cruel Age. These aren't the only stories found in Fear and Hunger, and they likely will not be the one that your playthrough tells. There are other gods to fight, other secrets to learn, and even if we're sticking to what Termina tells us is canon, there's a lot of wiggle room here, and that's a good thing. Everyone will have a different experience with Fear and Hunger. I don't think there's any other RPG quite like it. The ability for these disparate story threads to merely exist in this intertwined space feels miraculous in action. So what does Fear and Hunger actually have to say? There's some pretty dark stuff in the plot, and certainly more than I showed. And that's given it an undeserved reputation as some sort of try-hard edgelord game for sickos. People engaging in that kind of critique certainly have a point that these elements can be especially uncomfortable for some, and that players ought not to be blindsided with them. I think most people, although we'd all draw the line at a different point, might agree that gratuitous content can serve to glorify violent acts or diminish their seriousness, especially if they're handled carelessly. But something about the way that Fear and Hunger presents its content feels much more like commiseration than gratuity. Much like its titular deity, the game gets it. Life can be downright terrible, and one way or another, we all get a turn on the rack. Misery is something that everybody has in common, and by unabashedly embracing the darkness, these story elements can serve as a reminder that wherever you've been, somebody else has been there too.
What the?
Though the game
Unfair.
is nowhere near as funny as its sequel, it does have its moments. The characters are simple, but they're fleshed out enough to care about. Enki, for instance, probably only has 10 or 12 lines in the entire game, but so much is suggested that it's not hard to imagine how he'd react to the bizarre situations your party runs into. Character art helps a lot with this. I mean, look at it. You know exactly what kind of guy this is. This game is good. It's really, really good. I've said in a review that its sequel, Termina, might be a better entry point due to its polish, but I think the original has a lot of strengths that the sequel lacks, and its impenetrability might actually add to them. If Termina is a cut and polished diamond, the first game is a meteorite made out of solid gold that crashes into your house and takes your leg clean off. It's tough, yeah, but that's a one-of-a-kind experience. The game is less than $10 on Steam or itch.io. I really hope you'll check it out, or at least go hit up the sequel, which I've done a shorter, spoiler-free review of. Thank you all, and I'll see you in the dungeon.
No thanks. I'll give it one more try and then I'm going back to just regular bosses. This just ain't fair.
何でもいい回復だ。チャンスだ相棒。